They say freedom lives in quiet places. And for me, that place had always been the lake. Tucked about 20 miles past the last gas station in Ashwood County, the cabin sat on 2.5 acres of woods and rocky shoreline that curved gently into a private cove. It was the kind of place you had to want to find. No paved roads, no cell towers, just a winding gravel trail that dipped through the trees like a forgotten memory. And that's exactly why I bought it. After 15 years living in suburban sameness, the type with beige garages, HOA patrol cars, and lawn regulations so strict they measure your grass with a ruler, I cashed out. I'd gone through a quiet divorce, kept the engineering firm, and dumped every penny I could into that cabin. It was old timber, hand-built in the 60s, with exposed beams, thick glass windows, and a dock that stretched like a lazy arm into the lake. It was perfect, peaceful, mine. Except, of course, peace doesn't last when someone decides your slice of heaven is actually community property. It started subtle, like most invasions do. One weekend, I arrived to find fresh tire tracks cutting across the edge of my property, not down the main access trail, but from the opposite direction, where my wooded line met the backside of the Maple Grove development. A gated community, HOA managed, the whole works. On the satellite map, it looked distant enough, a quarter mile through thick trees and uneven ground. But the tire ruts didn't lie. Someone had found a shortcut, and they were using it. I put up a basic split-rail fence where my property backed up to the woods. Nothing fancy, just enough to send a message. Private land. No trespassing. A week later, the fence was gone. Clean break. Sawed through in sections. The rails were laid neatly on the ground, as if someone had removed them with the full belief they had the right. That was when I met her. I was standing on my dock, coffee in hand, trying to decide whether to redig the fence post deeper or just call the sheriff. That's when I heard the sound. Not wildlife, not wind, but the subtle crack of twigs under the weight of someone trying to be stealthy. I turned, and there she was. Early 50s, tan skin, platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, high-end activewear that looked like it had never seen sweat. She carried herself like a woman who had never been told no. "Good morning," she chirped, like she hadn't just crossed onto private land from the woods. "Beautiful view you've got." I raised my cup and nodded. Wary. "Thanks. Private land, though. Didn't think anyone would be back this way." "Oh, I know," she said, waving it off like we were old friends. "I live up in Maple Grove. We got a back trail some of us have used for years. It's just so much quicker to the lake than driving around." I stared at her. "This is my land." She smiled, tight-lipped. "Technically, maybe, but there's been access through here since before your time. My kids used to cut through these woods to swim in the summers. And now, well," she said with a bright shrug, "it's kind of a gray area, isn't it? We just thought the old trail was public. I'm the president of the HOA, by the way. Name's Lynn." I didn't shake her hand. I reinstalled the fence that afternoon. Thicker posts, bolted crossbeams, and a chain-link backing that would take more than a handsaw to breach. I also ran a survey to confirm what I already knew. The path that Lynn and her Maple Grove neighbors were using cut directly across my southern boundary. No easement, no access rights, no mistake. It was mine. But somehow, that only made it worse. 2 weeks passed. I came back from a business trip to find the fence had been completely removed. Not cut this time. Just gone. Dug up and hauled away. Posts and all. In its place was a freshly laid gravel path, wide enough for an ATV. The trail ran right through the clearing where my fence had stood, down to the lake, and curved neatly along the shore behind my cabin, like it was a feature in some community park. I stood there staring, heart pounding in disbelief. A sign had been staked into ground at the edge of the trailhead. Community Lake Access. Use responsibly, Maple Grove HOA. They had built a path. On my land. And posted a sign claiming it. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. I wanted to know how far this would go. Some part of me, the stubborn engineer who'd spent his life calculating load-bearing stress and boundary lines down to the millimeter, needed to see it unfold. So I let it sit. I let them finish. That weekend, I parked down the road, and walked in quietly through the trees. What I saw made my stomach twist. Lawn chairs lined the lakeshore behind my cabin. A small floating dock had been pushed out into the water, homemade but sturdy. A cooler sat in the shade near the trail's end, with plastic cups and soda cans stacked inside. There was even a white laminated schedule posted to a tree. Weekend swim slots. Families AD 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. They weren't just using my land. They had organized it, assigned time slots, brought their kids, set up a whole recreational routine like it was an amenity in their clubhouse brochure. I took pictures of everything, the signs, the dock, the setup, and I waited. Monday morning, I drove into Maple Grove. The gates opened automatically as I followed a landscaping truck through. I parked near the HOA office, an over-decorated little building at the end of the community pool, and walked in with my folder of photos. Lynn wasn't there, of course, but her assistant, a too-cheerful young woman who wore her HOA badge like it was a federal ID, smiled as if I'd come donate to a bake sale. "I need to speak to Lynn," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said flatly. "Tell her Jake Carter's here." "From the lake." The girl blinked. A second later, Lynn appeared to a frosted glass door like she'd been waiting to be summoned. Her expression didn't change. Not surprise. Not guilt. Just a thin smile of someone who believed they had already won. "Jake," she said smoothly, "hope you're not here to complain about the access path. We actually had our legal team look into some old maps. There's precedent. There's no easement." I cut in, "And there's no precedent. What you have is a problem, one you need to fix." Her smile didn't falter. "We're simply doing what's best for the community. I'm sure once emotions settle, we can come to an agreement. After all, it's just land. You don't even live there full time." I looked at her like she'd grown horns. She folded her arms. "If you'd like to submit a formal complaint, you're welcome to write the HOA board." I nodded once, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked out without another word. She thought it was over, that I'd accept it, that the law was too messy, too slow, too expensive to fight. But she didn't know what I did for a living. She didn't know I specialized in infrastructure audits and land rights compliance. She didn't know I had just activated every contact I had in the county clerk's office, property records, and land use development. And she sure as hell didn't know what was coming next. By Wednesday morning, I had what I needed. The county records confirmed everything. The land was unencumbered, privately owned and fully protected. No recorded easement. No historical access. No right-of-way. The trail, the dock, the signs. Every inch of it was an illegal encroachment. But I didn't march down to the sheriff's office just yet, because if Lynn wanted to weaponize the community, then I was going to let her build the whole battlefield first. Let her decorate it. Let her walk right into the mess she was making, smiling all the way. So I let it go, outwardly anyway. I didn't rebuild the fence. I didn't block the path. I didn't remove the dock. In fact, I skipped coming to the cabin entirely for 3 weekends straight. During that time, Lynn and her board of khaki commandos got busy. I tracked it all through a wildlife cam I mounted high in a pine tree above the trail. The footage streamed straight to my phone. Friday nights brought cars, clean, expensive ones with HOA window decals, parking near the edge of their development. From there, they'd walk or ride bikes through the illegal trail they'd now begun calling the back gate. Saturday mornings looked like resort check-ins, beach bags, towels, sun hats, snacks. I watched as they expanded their setup. Folding tables, a hanging rope swing, even a freestanding umbrella bolted into the rocky sand just feet from my private dock. One man dragged a kayak through and launched it without hesitation. And Lynn? She wasn't just supervising. She was leading. She held a clipboard. She brought refreshments. She smiled and waved to the camera she didn't know was there. Then came the last straw. It was late June when I got a notification on my wildlife cam at 6:03 a.m. I was up, sipping coffee at my place in town, waiting for the right moment to strike. I pulled up the feed expecting to see the usual, a jogger, maybe Lynn out early prepping her beach. What I saw instead was a construction crew. Two workers, both wearing fluorescent vests, were hauling pre-cut lumber through the trail. Another man carried a concrete mixing drum. They weren't sneaking. They weren't subtle. They were building. I drove out to the cabin immediately, parked a half-mile up the gravel road, and hiked in quietly through the woods. Sure enough, they were installing posts. 4x4s buried deep and cemented in, a row of them, stretching from the trail's entrance all the way toward the lake. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I stepped out from the trees just as they were measuring a crossbeam. You boys know you're building on private land, right? The nearest guy looked up, blinking through sweat. Aren't you the guy who owns a cabin? Yeah, and this is mine. I pointed to the trail. All of it. He glanced at the other worker. Look, we're just doing what the HOA paid us for. Said this was approved by the board. We're putting up a shade, pergola, and 2 benches. That's it. Do you have a work permit? He paused. I mean, I don't think we need one. It's just minor landscape work. On your own land, maybe, I said, but not here. He scratched the back of his head. You'll have to take it up with the HOA, man. We're just labor. I took a photo of their truck, their tools, and a half-dug foundation before heading back into the woods. That night, Lynn sent me an email. No greeting, no explanation, just a PDF attachment labeled, Community Use Clarification Shared Lakeside Plan. The document was a mock proposal, formatted like a real development blueprint, complete with a logo and a fake municipal seal in the corner. It outlined a communal recreational amenity zone spanning approximately 30 linear feet, all of it on my side of the property line. I read every line. The phrasing was masterful in its vagueness. Historic use, underutilized shoreline, adjacent community partners, shared values of natural engagement. But what stood out was a final clause, buried at the end like a landmine. If no formal objection is submitted within 30 days of notification, community access will be considered customary and accepted. There it was, her whole plan. By doing nothing, I'd given her space, and she'd interpreted that as surrender. Worse, she had turned my silence into consent. She was trying to create a paper trail, a legitimacy. Make it look like this was a long-standing agreement between neighbors. Once the paper existed, she'd use it to convince the rest of the HOA board, and eventually the township, that public access to my land was a formality, a legacy right, casually accepted and never contested. The fact that she included a municipal-style seal, completely fake, told me she was banking on intimidation. Most people wouldn't question the legality of an official-looking stamp. Most people aren't me. The next morning, I met with a land use attorney named Harris, a colleague I'd worked with on a few commercial development audits. He reviewed the documents, the wildlife cam footage, the before and after satellite photos I'd pulled from Google Earth. When he saw the PDF, he laughed out loud. She's nuts, he said. This isn't even a legal notice. It's HOA cosplay. You don't need to prove anything. You've already won. I don't want to just win, I told him. I want it to end. Permanently. Harris smiled. Then let's make it official. Over the next 10 days, we built a case. We filed a cease and desist order with the county, citing illegal construction and trespassing. We drafted a formal lawsuit for land encroachment and property damage. We registered my surveillance footage with a time-coded affidavit. And then we filed a temporary injunction to immediately halt all activity within the disputed zone. But I didn't serve the documents right away. I waited because Lynn was still building, and I wanted her to see every piece of her dream finished. The benches, the pergola, the handmade sign welcoming Maple Grove residents. I wanted her to cut that last ribbon, the Friday before Independence Day. She did. My wildlife cam caught it all. Lynn, in a red blouse and khaki shorts, standing beneath the newly finished pergola, holding a pair of scissors. A dozen Maple Grove residents gathered around, clapping as she snipped a string of patriotic bunting stretched across 2 posts. One kid even released a few balloons into the sky. That night, I made one call. The next morning, at exactly 7:15 a.m., Lynn's community beach was greeted by a sheriff's deputy, 2 county inspectors, and a court process server, who handed her a thick envelope labeled Notice of Trespass and Civil Liability. Her face, as caught on my second cam, the one mounted to a tree behind the dock, was perfect. First confusion, then defiance, then disbelief. By noon, the crew she'd hired had been ordered to dismantle the entire structure. By 2 p.m., county officials had red-tagged the trailhead with official signage. Private property, no public access, by order of county court. And me? I was standing just out of sight, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, watching it all unfold with the same calm I'd once hoped to find when I first bought the land. Only now it was better, because this peace was earned. The red tag stayed up for exactly 3 days before someone tried to rip them down. I expected it, honestly. People like Lynn don't accept consequences. They stall, they argue, they twist the rules until the rules look like suggestions. But what she didn't realize was this. I wasn't just enforcing boundaries anymore. I was turning her own system against her. The footage from the wildlife cam caught it perfectly. A man in his 40s, wearing golf gear, sunglasses perched backward on his head, like a frat boy who never aged, yanking the county warning signs off the trailhead post. I reported it immediately, not to the sheriff this time, but to the HOA board. Not Lynn, her board. See, I got my hands on the full list of Maple Grove board members, elected volunteers. Most of them probably didn't know half of what Lynn had done. So I printed out the legal injunction, the cease and desist order, the photos of her beach opening, and emailed every single board member with one line. Are you personally aware your HOA president used HOA funds to build a recreation structure on privately owned land currently under lawsuit? The effect was instantaneous. The next day, a board member named Greg, soft-spoken, gray-haired, clearly nervous, emailed me back apologizing. He said he'd had no idea about the trail, the construction, or the lawsuit. He asked for a meeting. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I went to work on something better. I filed a petition with the county to rezone my parcel as commercial recreation, not to build anything. Not yet, but a signal that I could, under the new zoning. I could put up a private dock rental, a kayak club, even a lakeside bar if I wanted. I submitted renderings, a modern boathouse, rental kiosks, security fences, private event listings. All of it hypothetical, all of it legal, and all of it public record. Then I let the rumors spread. It started as whispers in the Maple Grove Facebook group. Someone posted a screenshot of the zoning request. Someone else found the renderings in the county archives. Within days, the comments section turned feral. He's building a business? On our lake. Won't that bring in strangers? Property values are going to tank. Can the HOA stop him? They couldn't. Lynn tried to hold an emergency meeting. I know because one of the board members, Greg again, sent me the agenda. It included things like damage control, legal strategy, and possible mediation with Mr. Carter. I didn't attend, but I did send them a certified letter. 1 page, typed clean and clinical, explaining that due to the damage caused by unauthorized use of my land, I would be installing a perimeter security barrier and vehicle deterrents along my southern property line, including the area formerly used as the HOA's illegal trail. Attached was a site plan for a 7-foot steel fence with privacy mesh motion lighting and a gravel trench running its length, a real eyesore and fully compliant with county regulations. I gave them 72 hours to remove the trail, dock debris, and pergola base, or my crew would remove it for them and bill the HOA directly. That was when Lynn snapped. At exactly 4:36 p.m. the following day, she showed up at my property, in person, with 2 men from the HOA board, a clipboard in hand and fury in her eyes. She didn't see the second cam I had pointed at the front gate. She marched right up the gravel trail, heels crunching, and started shouting. "You can't do this," she yelled, waving the clipboard like it was a holy relic. "You're threatening our community. You've turned a simple misunderstanding into a hostile campaign." I stepped onto the porch, calm as ever. "I told you weeks ago, Lynn, this is my land. You broke the law, and now you're facing the consequences." One of the board members looked deeply uncomfortable. The other just stared at the ground. "Lynn, for all her bravado, looked rattled, like a woman watching her kingdom burn from inside the throne room. "This won't stand," she said. "We'll take it to arbitration." I smiled. "Please do. I'd love to explain your fake city seal to a judge." She turned bright red. "We were trying to serve the neighborhood. Do you even realize what you're doing to the children in our community?" I blinked. "You mean the kids you let play on a dock built on stolen land?" Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You're a petty, vindictive man," she spat. "And you're trespassing," I replied. Then I pointed to the sheriff's deputy sitting in a parked cruiser just 20 feet away, waiting quietly on my gravel drive. Lynn hadn't seen him when she came up, but she saw him now. Her voice caught in her throat as the deputy stepped out and tipped his hat. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "you've been formally warned. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately." Lynn's face crumpled. Not quite tears. She was too proud for that. But it was the first real crack in her armor. She turned without another word and walked back down the trail. I gave her 2 more days. Then I broke ground. Not on the security fence. Not yet, but on something far more symbolic. I hired a contractor to dig a shallow trench, exactly where her trail had run. We filled it with crushed stone, lined it with LED path lights, and installed a 6-foot wrought iron gate right at the trailhead, emblazoned with a bronze plaque that read, "Private land, access by invitation only." Next to the plaque, I placed a new mailbox. Not a functioning one, purely decorative. But I had it custom built to match the ones used in Maple Grove, down to the same paint color and fake brass number plate. The message was clear. You want to treat this like your neighborhood? Fine. Here's your mailbox. Send me a letter next time. On the first Saturday after the trench was finished, I returned to the cabin just before sunrise. I poured coffee, sat on my deck, and waited, right on schedule. A family of 4 appeared at the edge of the woods, beach bags in hand, a soccer ball under the dad's arm. They stopped dead at the sight of the gate, confused, then annoyed. They turned around. 5 minutes later, 2 teenage boys rode up on bikes. One tried to climb around the side. My new motion sensors lit up the entire trail like a prison yard. They swore and bailed. By noon, the woods were empty. The following week, a public notice appeared on the Maple Grove HOA website. Due to unforeseen legal complications and community feedback, all unofficial lake access points are permanently closed until further notice. They didn't use my name, but everyone knew, and still I wasn't done, because now it was time to collect. Revenge, when it's done right, doesn't need shouting. It doesn't need spectacle. It just needs witnesses. And I was about to give Lynn the audience she deserved. The moment came faster than I expected. 2 weeks after the trail was sealed off, Maple Grove's HOA sent a formal letter. Not a mass email, but an embossed, legally reviewed document, requesting a settlement meeting. Not to fight, to surrender. The letter was stuffed with flowery phrases like mutual understanding, avoiding unnecessary litigation, and moving forward amicably. What it really meant was, please don't bankrupt us. Because by now, the damage wasn't just reputational. It was financial. My lawsuit had triggered a wave of panic among residents. Some threatened to withhold dues. Others blamed the board for letting things escalate. At least 3 homes reportedly paused their sales because potential buyers had caught wind of the lake access scandal. That's what they were calling it now, even in hushed conversations around the community pool. I agreed to the meeting on one condition. It would be held at my lake cabin. On neutral ground, they called it, but everyone knew it wasn't neutral anymore. Lynn didn't RSVP directly. She sent her attorney. The board showed up, too. 6 of them, all looking like they hadn't slept much in days. Greg was there, of course, fidgeting with his glasses. And Lynn? She arrived last, dressed in beige, carrying a leather-bound notebook like she was still running the show. I didn't greet them inside. I made them walk the trail. By then, my upgrades were complete. I'd regraded the old illegal access path, planted native shrubs, and installed discrete motion-triggered sprinklers, not to keep them out, but to keep deer away, officially. The fact that they'd soaked 2 teenagers a week before was, as far as I was concerned, just a feature. The path lights were dimmed to a warm golden hue. The wrought iron gate stood open, and right next to it, gleaming in the sunlight, was my newest addition, a polished brass dedication sign mounted on a curved cedar post. In honor of those who mistake trespassing for entitlement, I heard them stop, saw the way their silhouettes shifted against the trees as they read it in silence. Inside the cabin, I had everything arranged. The documents were stacked neatly on the dining table. My attorney, Harris, sat at the head, sipping from a thermal mug. I didn't stand. I let them sit down first. Let the awkward shuffle of papers and nervous throat clears fill the space. The only sound besides that was the gentle lapping of the lake outside the windows. Lynn spoke first. "We'd like to resolve this quietly." I nodded. "You already made it loud. Now we finish it clean." Harris slid the settlement across the table. "You'll agree to the following. A formal public apology issued by the Maple Grove HOA, acknowledging the illegal use of Mr. Carter's land. Full reimbursement for all legal fees, land restoration costs, and the surveyor's bills. In addition, the HOA will pay damages totaling $75,000 for encroachment, unauthorized construction, and reputational harm." Greg blinked. 75? Lynn cut in. "That's ridiculous." Harris didn't flinch. "Or we take it to court, and your insurance premiums double for the next 10 years. No one said anything for a moment. Then one of the board members, a tall woman with silver hair and a clipboard of her own, cleared her throat. "We can agree, with one amendment." I raised an eyebrow. She pushed forward a single line, scribbled in pen. "No personal names used in the public apology. The HOA takes full responsibility, but no individual board members are named." I pretended to think about it, then nodded. "Fine." Lynn didn't speak again. The documents were signed, stamped, "Witness." I offered no handshake, but I wasn't done, because I had one last surprise. The very next day, the apology letter was published on the Maple Grove HOA website. It also appeared on their community bulletin boards, slid into printed newsletters, and, as per the settlement, was mailed directly to every resident home in a white envelope marked "Legal Notice of HOA Activity." But what Lynn didn't know, and what I never told the board, was that I had quietly purchased the 1.2-acre strip of land that ran between my cabin and the southern boundary of Maple Grove, the very trail their residents had used. It had come up for sale through a tax lien auction, unclaimed, forgotten, and now mine. And with it, I renamed the trail. Using the newly approved commercial recreation zoning, I registered a private nature reserve with the county. Not a business, not a public amenity. A members-only ecological easement. Open by invitation only. I paid for signage. A little branding. Just enough flair to get noticed. 2 weeks later, a new wooden archway stood at the old trailhead. Carter's Cove, members-only private access conservancy. Established July 4th in celebration of true independence. Lynn saw it the following Saturday while walking her dog. She stopped at the edge of the trail, stared up at the arch, and then, as caught on my now permanently installed ring cam, walked away without a word. But the best part came months later. See, once a year, Maple Grove hosts its annual community picnic. For a decade, they'd held it in the park next to the lake, a spot they'd always accessed by cutting through my land. This time, they had to reroute the entire event. Shuttles, permits, portable restrooms, extra parking. It cost them nearly triple. And me, I hosted a private, members-only picnic on the same day. Just 20 guests. Old friends, work buddies, a few local vendors. We grilled, laughed, fished. Someone brought a drone and took sweeping aerial shots of the lake, the private dock, and the empty trail leading back to Maple Grove. I uploaded one of the shots to my cabin's Airbnb listing. Because, yes, now, Carter's Cove was a destination. And every weekend that passed, as Maple Grove residents peer across the trees and watch paying guests lounge on my land, they saw what Lynn had truly built. She wanted access. I gave her isolation. Autumn came earlier than usual that year. The trees flamed red and gold along the shoreline, and the lake, which had once been filled with weekend chaos, had gone still again. The kind of stillness I had dreamed of when I bought the cabin. That untouched, sacred silence you only get when there's no one around who thinks they own it with their opinions. For the first time in months, I had the place to myself again. No voices echoing from the trail. No children splashing behind my cabin. No folding chairs left in the sand. Just a faint rustle of dry leaves across my deck and the quiet clink of ice in a glass as I sat watching the late sun dip behind the trees. It should have felt like the end, but it wasn't. Not yet, because Lynn had one more lesson to learn. About a month after the apology letter went public and the settlement checks cleared, the Maple Grove HOA held their yearly board elections. Standard practice, really. Every October, right after the picnic, they shuffle the deck. A few retire, a few run again. It's all handled with the kind of stiff courtesy you'd expect in a neighborhood that names its cul-de-sacs after tree species. But this year, something changed. Lynn didn't run. She didn't even show up to the election meeting. I wouldn't have known or cared, except that Greg, the soft-spoken board member who quietly helped unravel her mess, emailed me the HOA newsletter. Buried between announcements about gutter cleaning and seasonal lighting contests was a single line. After 8 years of service, Lynn Whitaker has resigned from the board. We thank her for her time and leadership. No tribute, no photo, no party, just an exit. Dry and clean as a fire employee's goodbye email. Her resignation wasn't punishment. That had come earlier. This was something worse. This was exile, HOA style. Quiet, cold, permanent. Still, I wanted closure. Not from her, but from the land. The fence posts she once dug into my soil had left scars. Literal ones. Uneven patches of earth. Lingering holes. Debris I'd stepped around for weeks. So I decided to do something symbolic. I hired a local artist, a metalsmith who worked in reclaimed iron and bronze, and gave him a project. 3 weeks later, it was finished. A sculpture, 6 feet tall, wrought from salvaged fence posts, old screws, a broken mailbox, and the rusted base of what used to be the pergola Lynn had built behind my cabin. The artist shaped it into a spiraling figure, not abstract, but clearly representative of a tree twisted in the wind. It stood bent at the middle, branches reaching toward the lake, roots gripping a base of crushed gravel and hardened cement. At the center was a single inscription, etched into a ring of polished copper. Respect grows where boundaries are kept. I installed it at the edge of the old trail, facing outward, facing Maple Grove. A month later, I got a message on Airbnb from a woman named Cara. She and her husband had booked a fall weekend retreat at the cabin. Said the sculpture had moved her to tears. She asked if there was a story behind it. I told her the truth, a version of it, anyway. That tree's made from things that weren't supposed to be here. Things someone forced into the ground without permission. Now it stands in peace because it knows its roots. She left a 5-star review. But the real ending came a few weeks after that. I just returned from a supply run when I saw a familiar white SUV idling at the trail's edge. Not on my land. She wouldn't make that mistake again, but just close enough to see. Lynn. She wasn't dressed like before. No activewear. No clipboard. Just jeans, a hoodie, and a look I couldn't quite read. She stood outside the vehicle, arms folded, watching the sculpture from across the boundary line like someone visiting a grave. She didn't approach. She didn't wave. She just stood there for a minute. Then she turned, got back in the SUV, and drove away for good. I never saw her again. Winter came, and with it, a hush that blanketed everything. Snow filled the old trail like nature herself was sealing the wound. The cabin's dock frosted over. The trees turned skeletal and still. It felt like the land had exhaled. And me? I finally found what I've been chasing all along. Not just quiet, but peace. Not just solitude, but sovereignty. And the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't about screaming louder or pushing back harder. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone build their little empire of entitlement, then standing still as it crumbles under the weight of its own arrogance. They thought they were taking a shortcut to the lake. They didn't know they were walking straight into the longest lesson in their lives.